Welcome to this MVI Empowerment Hour. We're going to talk about Hospice CAP today. My name is Troy Gehrke. I'll be your presenter here today. However, this segment here is pre-recorded. However, immediately after this pre-recorded segment, Andrew and myself will be live to answer any questions that you have regarding this Hospice CAP. So, that being said, let's go ahead and we'll get started with this Empowerment Hour. As a hospice organization, you focus on providing comfort, dignity, and support to patients and their caregivers. While caring for patients is deeply rewarding, the financial side of hospice can sometimes feel very overwhelming. Hospice CAP is one of those challenges, but it doesn't have to be. At MVI, we cut through the confusion. We're going to explain what Hospice CAP is, how it works, and how to manage it. Okay, so let's advance to the next slide here. Now, okay, what is CAP? The 30,000-foot overview of what CAP is okay, Hospice CAP is a safeguard to ensure that a hospice organization doesn't receive more than what Medicare's estimation is to provide end-of-life care. Okay, this also helps Medicare for their budgeting. Medicare establishes a maximum cap per Medicare beneficiary. For 2025, I believe the amount is $34,465 some odd dollars, but for the purpose of this presentation, let's just say it's $34,000 per Medicare beneficiary. Okay, so if you're a hospice and you're providing services, Medicare hospice services to 100 Medicare beneficiaries, you will receive up to $3,400,000. Okay. Now, however, if you receive more than that, then you're considered over cap, and that's going to have to be paid back to Medicare. Now, if this is your hospice's situation, congratulations. You just received the maximum amount of reimbursement that you can receive from Medicare. You cannot get another dime. Any additional amount over that amount that I just mentioned, $3,400,000, has to be paid back to Medicare. So I had mentioned 100 Medicare beneficiaries. Medicare has two different ways of counting Medicare beneficiaries, and this is where estimating CAP for your hospice organization gets a little tricky. Okay, so with that being said, let's go to the next slide here. So I've got some statistical information here on the screen, and we'll basically go over this a little bit, and then we'll get more into some specifics regarding the Hospice CAP. So Hospice CAP is calculated on an annual basis, and the CAP year ends September 30th. Okay, so the self-determined CAP submission is due the last day of February. Amounts in excess of CAP are considered overpayments and must be repaid back to Medicare. So, okay, now notice percent of hospices that are over CAP. Notice between 2020 and 2023, there's a 4% increase. If this trend continues, we can expect to see close to 25% of hospices over CAP in fiscal year 2025. What is Medicare doing about that? I have no idea, but I'm assuming it's a concern of theirs also. I mentioned the two methods of counting beneficiaries. There's a streamlined CAP calculation methodology, and there's what's called a fully prorated CAP calculation methodology. Okay, the first one, just remember streamline. Okay, that's a simple calculation for estimating CAP. The fully prorated, which was formerly called patient-by-patient proportional, is much more difficult to estimate. The name has changed. It used to be the patient-by-patient proportional. Now it's the fully prorated. It's only the name that has changed. There's no difference in the calculations between those two names. Another statistic here, Streamline, 17% of hospice organizations are using the Streamline CAP calculation methodology. 83% are using the fully prorated CAP calculation methodology. The default methodology since 2012 is the fully prorated. So before 2012, there was the Streamline. Medicare made the change in 2012. So basically what ended up happening is any hospice organizations that are established in 2012 or later automatically are using the fully prorated CAP calculation methodology. There is the Streamline again, that was with established hospices. There's the fully prorated. Hospice organizations don't have a choice as far as like if they're fully prorated, they cannot contact Medicare and say, hey, we want to be Streamlined. That's not an option. However, if you are Streamlined and you want to become fully prorated, I wouldn't recommend that. However, if you are Streamlined, you can go to the fully prorated CAP calculation methodology. Okay? We'll go into an example here now of actually how the Streamline is calculated, how the Medicare beneficiaries are calculated in Streamline. The Streamline is a simple calculation. Basically, there's one CAP allotment per admission in the CAP year admitted. Okay? And if this is a long-lived patient, that take the example, we're just say like working with one patient that's been admitted. So that CAP allotment basically just goes to the CAP year that the patient is admitted, but there's zero CAP allotment in the other years. So as this long-lived patient lives like a year, 2 years, 3 years, only the first year gets the CAP allotment. And with the example of the 2025 CAP total, basically the $34,000 would be allotted to that first year. Now, with this fully prorated, this is a little bit more complex. Okay, so the CAP allotment is allocated over the years of receiving hospice services. So the patient days is the allocation base that's being used for the CAP allotment that's going to be allocated to the different years. So if we've got the example of that one patient that lives, that's a long-lived patient, 2 years, 3 years, okay, which does happen, it's not uncommon, and there's really nothing wrong with it, I'm just saying, but the patient days is the allocation base for going over those different CAP years, okay? Now, with the fully prorated, here's the potential problem. It's not always a problem, but it can be a potential problem, okay? The longer a patient remains in hospice, the more the Medicare beneficiaries are decreased in that first year. Medicare reevaluates CAP totals. They can go back 3 years, or I shouldn't say they can go. They will go back 3 years, okay? So with the situation of, say, this one patient was admitted in 2025, and let's say the patient was admitted in September of 2025, which is last month of the CAP year for 2025, okay? So when you process the self-determination CAP for 2025, it's probably very realistic that 50% of the CAP allotment was included in your 2025 CAP submission, which would be, if it happens to be 50%, so 50% is in the 2025, 50% is in the 2026, which of course isn't going to be calculated until the following year. But when you're submitting the 2025 self-determination CAP, 50% is allotted to that first year. That's the year that that patient was admitted. So $17,000 is included in that cap total. What ends up happening where this becomes a potential problem, especially if it's a patient that lives 2 years, 3 years. Okay, now let's jump forward 2, 3 years, okay? Specifically, it really doesn't matter, the example is still the same. Okay, now you're processing the 2028 cap calculation methodology, okay? That patient, that one patient that was admitted in the cap year 2025 is still living, and that individual is included in the 2028 self-determination cap submission. Because that individual is still living, that cap allotment is being spread out over like the 3 years, 2025, 26, 27, 28, okay? That $17,000 that was originally allotted back in 2025, okay, that's greatly reduced in 2025, and it's also being reduced, even up into 2028. So you process your cap, self-determination cap, you submit, okay, everything's golden. Okay, Medicare goes back 3 years and does a review. How they do they'll go back 3 years with the fully prorated. They also do a review with the streamline methodology also. However, streamline's not nearly as much of a problem as is the fully prorated. And what I mean by that is so here it is, 2028. Medicare is looking back 3 years. They're looking back at the 2025 and reevaluating the cap total there. That one patient that had been admitted, and when you presented or when you submitted that 2025 cap calculation, self-determination cap submission to Medicare back in 2025, $17,000 was allotted at that time. There was nothing wrong with your submission at that time. Everything looked fine. Maybe you were close to cap, or maybe you were even maybe a little over cap. $1,000 over cap is no big deal. You just pay it and move on. However, because that allotment for that one patient has been reduced dramatically, now again, if this is an individual that's been living for like 3 years, what was originally 50% allocated to that 2025 has now been reduced to like 2%, okay? So you basically pretty much have almost, nothing allocated to the 2025. Now, if you're that type of organization that was either close to cap or maybe a little over cap, let's make the example of maybe you were a little over cap. You paid $1,000 back in 2025, 2026 when you actually made the submission. Now, you're many thousands dollars over cap. And Medicare is going to require that be paid back. Now, multiply that by 10 long-lived patients, 20 long-lived patients. Instead of, maybe paying like an additional $10,000 for back in 2025, maybe you're having to pay $1 million, okay? This does happen to hospice organizations. So you need to understand how this fully prorated cap calculation methodology works so that you can be prepared for a possible scenario like this happening, okay? Now, as far as managing hospice cap, there's a couple of things you can do. You can rerun prior year PSNR reports for when you are calculating your self-determinated cap submission. You always have to access the PSNR reports when you're doing your self-determinated cap submission. Now, let's say you're in 2027, 2028, you're accessing your PSNR reports. While you're accessing your PSNR reports for, say, that year, you can also at the same time request the PSNR reports for the prior years. So I highly suggest that you do that. It doesn't take any longer to run the PSNR reports for 3 years than it does for 1 year, okay? So I highly recommend that you do that. Now, in doing that, then what you can do is you can recalculate your self-determination cap for, say, 2025. Now, you'll notice if you make a comparison, if you still have saved your PSNR report for 2025, and then when you rerun that 2025 PSNR report in 2027, 2028, you're going to notice that the amounts on those PSNR reports have changed. And that causes the self-determinated cap amount for that year to change. Okay. Now, when you originally submitted your 2025 self-determinated cap submission, everything may have been fine, or maybe you were over $1,000. Okay. Now, when you rerun with the latest updated PSNR report, and if you're a situation where you have multiple long-lived patients, you will find that the amount that you're over cap for 2025 has increased substantially. Now, when you see that, just don't go ahead and pay Medicare for the 2025 amount that you're now over, but do understand that Medicare is going to do a reevaluation of that prior year, and they're going to see that, okay, back in 2025, 2026, when you submitted that cap, and maybe it was $1,000, you know, now maybe it's $10,000, or maybe it's even $1 million. Understand you are going to have to pay that. They will contact you, and at that time you'll have to pay it at that time. Okay, but at least if you're rerunning those PSNR reports, it won't be a surprise to you when Medicare comes requesting that additional amount. Okay. So another thing we can do for, let me back up just a moment. Okay, so you can run PSNR reports at any time, not just for your self-determination cap submission. So if you're early in your cap year, you can run the PSNR report, see how you're doing. If if you're 3 months, 4 months, 5 months into that cap year and you see that you're over cap, now you've got time to make adjustments to get yourself, your organization, back under cap before the end of that cap year. So highly recommend that you run your PSNR reports during the cap year also. Okay, now something else as far as for managing hospice cap is monitor median length of stay. Do not use average length of stay. Okay, median length of stay is much more stable and much more consistent. The average length of stay, for the most part, usually comes from your EMR system. And what they are, the calculations that they're using, what the EMRs are using, is the average length of stay of patients when they pass away. So if you've got a long-lived patient that's been living, 2-3 years before they pass away, when they pass away, it causes a large variance in that average. Okay, so don't use average. You're going to want to use the median length of stay. Much more stable. Now, as far as determining what's the correct median length of stay for your organization, that's something you're going to have to calculate and monitor to see, what's proper. Is 70 median length of stay, 70 days, is that good for your organization? Maybe 80 is good, okay? But depending on your organization and what your average, I say average, reimbursement is from Medicare, if you're a hospice organization, for the most part, you provide routine home care. Okay, you're going to have a lower average reimbursement rate than a hospice organization that also has an inpatient unit. There's going to be a higher reimbursement rate, and it's going to cause your average to go higher, and which is going to require you to have a lower median length of stay if you have an inpatient unit as compared to a hospice organization that pretty much just provides routine home care. Okay, so that's something that you'll have to play around with, but we can assist you with that also. Okay. And that completes this pre-recorded segment of this Empowerment Hour. And we're immediately going to just follow up live, and we're going to address your questions that you have. Thank you.
Okay. Here we are, everybody. Q&A. And wasn't Troy just magnificent there?
Well, thank you.
Well, it's lots of years in the saddle of doing cost reports. And of course, CAP was one of the first things, really, MVI, back in the early years. I mean, we knew CAP like, well, we just came up against it. And we had, some really great ways of managing CAP, and hopefully we can convey some of those things here and all this. But let's just open up, first of all, the questions that people have, and make this as value rich as we can. Hey, Troy, you want to say anything else here?
No, I'm just interested in the questions, and we'll address those.
Yeah. I will say this, Troy ended up with talking about a couple of the measures of central tenancy regarding like average length of stay, median length of stay. Huge difference here. Now, the median based on terminated patients still does not help you very much in your CAP calculation. It should be median length of stay based on living patients. That is for the ongoing measurement or management of your CAP situation. Because the point is a person has to either die or be discharged to even come into the calculation. And this is why people can get their letter back or whatever, look at their PSNR and go, oh, we're way under CAP. And then suddenly next year get a letter saying they owe $2 million back to the Medicare system because they were using this flawed measurement of average length of stay. That will take you to hospice hell. For ongoing management, it requires, in your EMR, and most EMRs do not give you this, is running out a list of your active patients, the patients that have not died, taking the start of care date, subtracting today's date, and then doing a median function on that column, and that will tell you where you really are. And I could go through an illustration about how to find out what your target should be, because you also don't want to run way under CAP, because then basically you're just doing brink of death care, and that is not quality. Your job as a professional hospice person is to try to run as close up to the CAP as you can. Because is it better to be served for 4 days or 4 months? What is a better quality experience? Well, obviously the longer length of stay. So, and so much of the length of stay has to do with hospice's practices. So what I'm suggesting there is that you want to go as close to the CAP, but incorporate what we call the screw-up factor. That if you screw up, because people don't die on schedule, right? And this is where, like I say, the streamlined method gives you this really nice, elegant, and which is worth more on the open market, because it is a better way of managing. Whereas the prorated or the fully prorated or proportional is an ever-changing situation, because nobody knows when people are going to die or be discharged. And that's what makes it problematic, where you get penalized for admissions years past. So with that said, let's go. Sorry to ramble there, but this is an important topic. This can put people out of business.
Okay, so I see a question here. Okay, so I'd like to know how accepting a patient in their 30th benefit period affects the new hospice organization. What are the potential CAP concerns we need to address prior to deciding if we can admit the patient? So if I understand the question correctly, this is a patient that has been receiving hospice services in another provider. and they've been discharged from that provider, and now they're coming back into hospice.
Yeah, but long-termer was discharged from another hospice.
Yes. So you mentioned here the 30th benefit period. Okay, so just a quick example is, okay, you admit the patient, and let's say the patient lives for 30 benefit periods. Okay, so again, the patient days is the allocation base. So in 50% of the allotted cap is going to go to the prior provider, 50% is going to go to the second provider. That's basically how that works. Now, I just gave the example where 30 benefit periods in the first hospice and 30 benefit periods in your hospice, 50%. But ultimately, patient days is the allocation base.
Well, and even in that situation, both hospices are going to be impacted. Isn't this correct? Because
yes.
You have first one, they live X amount of time. And then, of course, with the unknown death situation, because we don't have a team of actuarials, however long that person spends, if they end up spending 3 more times the amount of time with the other hospice is going to get 3 times the amount of the cap allocation. Correct? So you got 1 quarter here, you got 3 quarters here. The hospice with the most service to it's going to get the most proportion of that cap.
Yes. And it'll be spread out. If they happen to be long-lived, you admit them, and they live for 2 years. Okay, you're going to get the majority of the allotted cap, but it's going to be broken out over the 2 years.
Yep.
So, I hope that makes sense. Will MVI continue to send out the email reminders and instructions for submitting CAP? Yes, we're going to continue to send that. For the most part, the header on that email that we send out to everybody it's a reminder. We do provide information and instructions so that you can process your self-determinated CAP. However, you do want to make sure that you're actually accessing your MAC's instructions. Different MACs have different instructions. So you just want to make sure that you're actually submitting the CAP in the proper manner to your specific MAC. But yes, we are going to continue to be sending those out.
The other thing too is in the management application, if you're benchmarking, with MVI, which everyone should, because otherwise you're going to be an amateur and you're not going to have that professional perspective of 1,000 other hospice organizations regarding your cost. And of course, with that, you can intelligently direct your resources and energy. But within the MA application is the CAP management tool. And it's an extraordinary tool, whether you're on the streamlined method, it's kind of modeled after the streamlined method, but that still is a good method, even if you're still on the proportional or the fully prorated method. We would still recommend that you use this tool. We also, I think, probably on our website have a standalone CAP tool as well, so you could get at it, but this is kind of an exclusive MVI deal here that tool is phenomenal. And I remember I've been with these mega 1,000 hospice things, and I remember I was in a room with 30 other people wondering how do you solve this CAP thing, and they had 60-page manual and stuff. I said, you don't need any of this, guys. Here's a simple spreadsheet, and in about 15 minutes, you'll know where you need to be. You'll know what your target is, your optimal place where you want to get, as well as where you can measure whether you need to increase marketing efforts or whatever you need to do. You can make operational decisions from that. Go ahead, Troy.
Okay. Next question here. If you're a hospice, you're finding yourself that you're over cap, but it's before the end of the cap year. Okay, now what are the moves to minimize how much you would have to repay to Medicare, or maybe not even have to repay at all?
Go ahead, Troy.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. We do have a document that basically takes you through the procedures here that's on our website. And if you're a client, you can access this on our website and download this. But really, for the most part, is okay. So if you find yourself over cap before the end of the cap year, the best, the better situation is the sooner you can find that you're over cap, the better, because that's just going to give you more time to make adjustments. Yes. Yeah. Manage
it every month, even if you're getting high or close to it.
You want to be managing that. But if you do find yourself that that you are over cap, then I mean, one of the best things you can do, quite frankly, is, if it works out that way, of course, is you're basically going to want to admit short-lived patients, because if you have a short-lived patient that's lives for a week or even just a couple of days, that gives you the cap allotment left over, basically from that short-lived patient, that basically covers your other long-lived patients, which is probably the reason why you're over cap. Yeah. But if you can have some time and get some short-lived patients, that'll get you out of trouble.
Case in point, when I was a snot-nosed kid, at 32 years old, and it actually, I became the CFO because we hit a cap issue. And I read about this thing called CAP, and what the heck is this, and how are we doing? This is at Hospice of Winston-Salem. And nobody told me to do this, and I read about it, and I thought, oh my God, I wonder how close. I read about this thing called CAP, and I researched it and found out, kind of what it is. And I did the calculation. We were going to owe about $3.5 million back to the Medicare system. And then I took the numbers of admissions, multiplied by the amount, came out about $3.5 million. I went back to Vicky, who was over medical records. We actually counted the charts, multiplied by the rate, and we're going to owe about $3.5 million. Okay, that situation, I think I discovered it in March or April, and we didn't end up owing $3.5 million, even though it was discovered then. We got right on it and we pumped up the admissions. I mean, you can hire marketers at that point and feed on the street, but that's your main thing. You pump up admissions. The other thing is, chances are you have a disproportionate amount of patients that are probably not or don't meet hospice criteria. I think that you have to probably discharge these people, but note this: we discharged about 50 patients. And then some smart social worker said we need to monitor and see how they're doing. And we found out that probably 50% of them were dead. And this is the thing that when I've talked to congressmen and MedPAC and what have you, quality hospice increases length of stay, but yet we're being penalized. We're going to have a conversation maybe later this year about this. Again, if I get invited back to MedPAC to talk hospice recommendations. So go ahead and do your discharges if you need to do that, but monitor them, because when you pull the comfort rug of hospice away from people, they will die, or a proportion will die. And the third thing you can do is, if you can get in some temporary situations regarding inpatient care. It's not like you can add water and have an inpatient unit, or slap some double wides together and there you go, got an inpatient unit. It's not quite that easy. But you can contract with nursing homes with 24-hour nursing and things like that, and that can dramatically change really that dynamic to get a bunch of those short-living patients. Now, with that said, with the proportional method, you're going to have to keep that up on some level, because it's not just one and done at this point, because whatever sins you have in the cap area are going to haunt you going forward. And that's the big surprise that people have right now. It's like the nightmare. Like the people that were on the streamline method, which really works, and they got sleepy, and we put out tons of emails. Keep your streamline, check the box, send a letter out. And people just, this is why we have the 17% there. They didn't heed it, and people are paying the price, because basically you have a system that's very difficult, if not impossible, to manage with the same precision. I'm sorry. Let's keep going.
No, you're good. I spoke for 2 minutes and you
Yeah.
just elaborated for a while,
Then
so that's
the
fine.
windbag gets in the way.
Okay.
So sorry.
Okay, we got another organization here that, okay, they were streamlined and for some unknown reason they switched over to proportional in 21, 22. Is there a path to switch back to streamline at this point? Unfortunately, there is not. Once the switch had been made to proportional, fully prorated, there's no going back to the streamline.
Yeah, and here's the thing is, we don't know all the motives, and I'm not trying to say that there is malicious intent here, but because of the uncertainty of we can't time or people don't die on command, of course, predictably, we've set up a situation where tons of hospices are going to go over the cap. That was our prediction and in our recommendations back in then. Of course, this is going to happen, and that's what's happening. Now, if the intent is to drive hospices out of business, well, so be it. You know, that's their prerogative. But again, our job, all of us, is to be a hospice professional, a professional manager. And that includes managing, you know, this important thing that can take down the whole ship if it's not, you know, operationalized, I should say, intelligently. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay, next question, Andrew, this one is directed towards you. Okay.
Lord.
Okay. Would you prefer, say if you were like the CEO of a hospice organization, would you prefer to owe back $300,000 or fall short $1.5 million under cap?
Oh, well, put it this way, it depends on the frequency. I have no problem with going under cap. That's basically a cost of doing business. You know, we've gotten everything, you know, out of it. We have long length of stay, which could be good quality hospice care at that point, instead of the one and done, you know, people come in and die, brink of death care, as I say. I would rather pay back, but not every year. Not every year. You don't want to make it a pattern thing, because then you set yourself as a target. And you don't want to be outrageously over. But being way under, that just, to me, it screams of a lower quality hospice. And a lot of hospices complain about length of stay. But the truth is we have more control over length of stay than we think. It just doesn't, we're not victims, that it just happens to us, that people are holding on to patients, whatever. The question is, have we communicated the value of hospice in our communities and become not so conservative and afraid of ADRs and scrutiny and stuff, but if we have perfect if we're doing the perfect visit, we already should be doing perfect documentation. We're going thousands of visits without a single screw up or documentation error. Well, that gives great confidence, and right there, length of stay is going to shoot up. Mm-hmm. Let's just put the equation like this. Quality documentation increases length of stay because it increases the confidence level of clinicians. Whereas if people get shaky and nervous and they hit the discharge button, just because someone's hit a plateau or where they're having very gradual or slow decline, we have to learn how to document the slow decline.
Good. Next question. If I am way under cap, what are some suggestions to minimize what I am leaving on the table? Okay. This is an internal job. It's not in the external world. We get the mirror out and go, have we been way too conservative? Is our compliance people holding us hostage? Are we taking the grays? But with that said, you know, I say that you've got to take a look at your perfect documentation that's being done at the point of care, which can be measured. We can get that out of EMRs, like, there you go, whether that's being done. But when we get that perfect documentation, we increase that confidence, and then we start, as the CEO, broadcasting and training our clinicians, again, in documenting slow decline.
Okay, and what is the evidence behind this? Well, after 35 years of doing this, I'm going to go ahead and put out the number now. I've always been like, God, this is like a long time. Why is it that, like Deborah Daly, my mom in hospice, every hospice she went into, the length of stay, and that's based on terminated patients, would increase about 30 days. So, she starts out in Kentucky, she comes to Winston-Salem, we go down to Palm Beach, we go to Hospice of Dayton. Every one of those places, the length of stay rockets up. Well, did everybody drinking the water in those localities just say, have a V8 moment and say, wow, I could have had hospice? No. Deborah Daly in this situation, and Maylene does a great job. There's a whole bunch of them, painted a picture of what the hospice patient would look like, and that we're going to take a chance on the grays. And then we're going to appropriately use the recertification process to assess these patients. That right there can double a hospice's census, help you out get more of the CAP, which you're entitled to, and ultimately provide greater care and service to the community with what hospice really is, rather than brink of death care. I'm a little sick, folks, so if I'm like weird, I've been having the flu for like the last 25 days. And so there's probably a lot of fever talking here, but anyway. and of course, Troy, there's no one I want to infect, and Troy, I think, is immune to this, so. Bernie I've already got, so.
I'll let you know.
Alex, you're feeling okay, yeah.
Update.
No, it's been a long time. I think I'm beyond contagious.
Okay. Another question. Andrew, you mentioned the screw-up factor. What percent do you recommend as a screw-up factor?
I have backed that down. There's times I've run it as hot as 90%, basically 10%. I can illustrate. I don't know if my brain's working well enough that I could actually use a whiteboard. I had Bernie go get one, but I can show you how to figure out what your target is and all this. But I backed that down to 70%, but I wouldn't go any lower than that. That basically, when you find your target amount that you want to be aiming for as far as median length of stay based on living patients, again, not deceased patients, living patients, when you find that number, I multiply it by a 0.7 or 70%, and I feel good about that. Because then the screw-up factor works on both ends. The FI or MAC could screw up, or you could screw up, and you're still okay. Now, with that said, 80% is still probably a pretty good number, and I would probably be more inclined to do that, because I know when I'm looking at it, and with the hospices that MVI helps manage directly, we're going to be looking at that, and so my risk can go up because. We just know how to interpret that. But if you don't feel quite as sure of yourself, that 70% might be better.
And the longer you monitor that from year to year, you'll be able to tweak that percentage.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
To your advantage.
It's a skill like anything else. But the fact is that these tools that we have created, they take moments. And I know that if I'm the CFO, and I still am a CFO for a hospice, okay, we'll take a look at that, and I'll just say, okay, marketing, we need 50 more admissions, depending on the size. Maybe we need 20, we need 10 more admissions, or we're good. But the point is, there's a communications, there's some intelligence about kind of what we need, especially when we're getting close to that cap. That's when you definitely you have to determine how you're going to operationalize the situation.
I don't see any other questions. So.
Oh my God. Should I show some of this? I don't know if I'm even capable of doing it. But it might be good for giggles and laughs. Bernie, assist this. The stuff's going around all right. Come on, let's do a Vanna White here. And all that. But let me just show you this as far as getting to.
You got a marker.
Yeah, I got a marker. I'm never without my writing utensils. High quality ones at that. Okay, Jesus, help me out. One of the first things is we want to figure out what our target would be. By the way, we never planned on doing this. This is just coming out of my head because I think it would be useful. And someone get a calculator going here, and you got my phone here. You can help me out. Okay, there's a calculator right there on top. Okay, so finding out what your target is. So we take basically the aggregate cap amount. Let's get some good ink going there. And so let's take the $34,465. I don't know why that number anchored in my head, but it did. And we want to divide that by our Medicare routine rate. And I'm not going to go into this completely here, but that rate, you can use your tier 1 strictly, or you can do basically a weighted average with 60% with tier 1 and 40% of tier 2. And I'm not trying to mess anyone up that could be mathematically challenged here, because I am mathematically challenged. The IQ of 40 is in full display here. So, but let's just say that you take your tier 1, which would be a more conservative number, or you want to get fancy and you use a weighted average, and you come up with 170? That's
Sure.
a nice number. Okay, so $170 is your routine rate. Okay, we do that division, and what's that equal?
202.7.
200 what?
202.7.
Okay, 202.7. Okay, it's always nice to go to the first decimal. Anyway, that is the most your median length of stay based on living patients can be. Anything above that, you're above your cap. So that becomes your target, basically how high it can go. Again, you've got to go in your EMR, get a list of current patients, living patients, patients that have not died or have been discharged. Okay, you need to bring in the start of date or start of care field and subtract today's date from that. And then basically how many days have they been in service. Maybe there's some other fancy reports that you can get out to an Excel file to do this. Okay. Then you do a median function, because your EMRs normally are not bright enough to do this. We've been preaching to them. A few of them put it in it, but not many. Okay. You'll do a median function, not an average, a median. Okay, and then you're going to look at this number. So if you do this and it says, hey, I'm at 220, guess what? You're over. If it comes in at 190, it's like, hey, we're close. If we're way under it, you've got work to do on your length of stay. Really your value proposition. Okay, now with this said, let's get the screw up factor in here. So let's just say we want to use this 7, or this 70%, okay? 70%. There's your screw up factor. Okay, let's, Troy, multiply 0.7 into that 202.7 days. Yeah, it's a multiple.
141.9.
141.9. Okay, there's your target. Okay. There's your target. With that kind of information, you can start managing CAP. The earnest you go method basically means, and this is in our tool, you just every single month you say how many new admissions have we have, and then you multiply whatever rate towards it. But again, that works great for Streamline, and it still is a good way of measuring, but realizing that you're fully prorated, the new terminology, or proportional is a changing C. Here you go. Is a changing C, and you're never quite sure where you are, and that's that. So you want to have some screw-up factor.
Yeah, and you'll want to rerun your PSNR report and just verify if how this median length of stay is working for you.
Yeah, let's put it next to the drums. But anyway, let's see if that generated any more questions here. And not that I was trying to generate questions.
No other questions.
Okay.
You must
tuned out.
You must be very clear.
Once we got to the math, it was pretty boring. But that's a pretty sexy thing to do. I mean, for the hospice professionals, we all are moving that. But that's something that will serve you well as you're evaluating programs, sites, all kinds of things. You might even find the CAP thing. Again, I've been involved with obviously the largest hospices there are, and as well small. Even in multi-site situations, a lot of times we will manage CAP even on a site level. So I remember, we had like 26 sites, and every one of them, as part of the manager's job responsibility, the clinical leader in this case, or site leader, it was to manage CAP. Because we knew that we were always running hot, because that was our philosophy. And we wanted to know how each market was doing in that. And if it was too low, we knew that we had a very ultra-conservative manager that really wasn't serving us well, even though they're miles away from the CAP. That wasn't good enough for us. So it was really teaching the managers length of stay and staying in that sweet spot or that zone that we wanted to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, managing CAP is key, especially with the fully prorated. As far as compared to the Streamline methodology, it doesn't matter which one you have, you want to manage your CAP. However, if you find yourself behind the 8 ball with the patient proportional, fully prorated, it's much more difficult to get it back under control, especially because of how Medicare can go back and recalculate 3 years.
Now, with that said, I wouldn't be totally scared of CAP. Again, you can look at it as a cost of doing business, or you could look at it as a loan. But here's the other thing too. The problem is if we're not putting away reserves and we spend the money, through, say, sloppy operations or not going towards that more 90th percentile economics, or, instead of 5% profit, I mean, we've got to be doing at least 10, somewhere between 10 and the 13. That if you're doing that, you're putting away some money, and these things just won't kill you off. Whereas if you're running a much kind of looser operation, thinking we're going to get quality out of that, and we don't have the reserves to pay that back, okay, there you go. Then you're saying, hey, can we merge? Can we sell? Can we? It's like the death of that company.
Which does happen.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have anything else or any other comments?
No other questions that I'm seeing here.
Just probably the last thing, again, MVI client, I think it's called Managing CAP and stuff. It's on the enormous library. And then in the management application tool, if you're benchmarking, the CAP monitoring tool is good. And we've got a lot on this over the years and stuff. But there are some new, in this Empowerment Hour, there has been some new developments, I'll just say. I mean, a lot of this, there are things that are changing. And it, as far as like the number of hospices that are going over, even changing the name of it again and confusing people further and what have you. So, yeah. Oh, let me add one thing before we sign off, if it's okay. And there's going to be, we think, a fairly major event that'll happen in about 6 months that I wanted to make the MVI family aware of. And basically, there'll probably be tons of consumers that will be searching for the perfect visit and perfect phones. And they'll be using this to select what hospice they use. And I'm giving us, basically, our MVI clients a heads up to get ready, that we can kind of certify that you're doing this. Because that's going to be the questions from people in general. Where they're going to notice the way you answer the phone, because they're going to know exactly what to ask for. And they're going to know whether you're doing a perfect visit. They're going to want to see your lab. But anyway, there's going to be this thing that's going to happen in about 6 months, and that's plenty of time for people to get ready and to get your workforce, certified in the perfect visit, which you need to be doing annually anyway, through System 7. But the point is, the public at large is just going to demand high-quality hospice, and right now, the public at large cannot distinguish between bad hospice and good hospice. Well, they will be able to. So I'm just saying, get ready. So, anything else? All right.
I think we're all set.
Okay. We love you, and let's power on and have the best day of your life.
Thank you, everybody.